My name's Nick Green. I'm former Guardian journalist turned media company owner and entrepreneur. I co-founded and was creative director of a marketing company, a digital marketing company. I think a few of you are doing digital marketing MBAs. A media company, basically, a media agency, which I ran for 10 years, or co-ran for 10 years. As the creative director, I had to oversee a large team of editors, designers, video editors, producers, photographers, picture editors. I left there, sold my equity a couple of years ago, and now I'm working as a strategist, freelance strategist or consultant, or that's quite a nebulous term. Consultant, I always think. I have 2 young kids, an online chess addiction, and a serious shortage of spare time. And I want to talk to you today about leadership, but leadership in management as opposed to leadership, inspirational, creative leadership as exemplified by someone like, say, Picasso. I'm talking about leadership specifically in management. And I think a lot of bosses will have you think that they're kind of pretty good at their jobs, and of course this isn't always the case. You know, otherwise why would we kind of laugh in awful recognition at someone like David Brent from The Office? The reason that character works so well, obviously, is because the reason he has so much pathos is because, like it or not, we kind of identify with him. He's believable. He's kind of authentic. And so I think it's really important that, you know, we appreciate that for every really, really good boss out there, a boss that really, you know, concentrates on including his team, there is a boss who's, you know, really self-serving and unwilling to learn. And let's face it, learning is really, really key here. It's really key whether you're the CEO of FTSE 100 or whether you're a student. And just as a CEO can learn, so you can learn to be a CEO. I really believe this. I'm sure as students you're all very aware of, you know, trait theory and all the theories about, I think Lita was touching on it, whether you're born as a leader. Now, I don't doubt that some people are born innately with more qualities of leadership than others, but I also think it's completely irrefutable that the majority of leadership qualities can be learned. I think it's really, really, I think it's very obvious. So I started my company a long time ago now, and we quickly had to escalate from the 3 founders to 30 or so of us. And I frankly wasn't prepared for that escalation at all. And to be honest, which I think is the best way to be, for the first couple of years I was a pretty mediocre leader. Pretty poor. I'd worked for the last 10 years in various newspaper offices around the UK and around London, national newspaper offices. And they operated a culture or a climate of fear, basically. You did your work simply because if you didn't, there'd be someone sure as hell behind you, coming up behind you, who'd do your work. And so that's the kind of climate that I tried to integrate into my company. You know, so I thought people should be privileged to be there, and so just should do their work. I basically acted in a relatively kind of autocratic way, a kind of coercive style of management, and actually didn't work at all. It really didn't. And what happened very, very quickly, I think, was that people started to become distant, surly, kind of uncooperative. They used to have that look on the face that said, kind of, you know, hang in there, retirement's only 40 years away. And gradually they became cynical. And in my naivety, I kind of ostracized the ones that were becoming more unproductive, and I focused on the ones that were actually, you know, loyal. And that created a really, really 2-tiered culture, which was deeply, deeply unproductive, and it didn't really work very well at all. The analogy that I'd like to bring up is with the riots last year in London. I don't know whether you're all here for the riots, but, and I don't want to go into the politics of it, but obviously as a former Guardian journalist, you probably appreciate that I don't think we should just kind of lock them all up and throw away the key. But there were a few really interesting things that came out in the analysis after the riots about why the riots had taken place, about how we've become really acquisitive as a nation, and, you know, this buy one get one free culture that you see around us, you know, it's really, you know, it's only a couple of steps beyond that to kind of looting. It's controversial, but what's really relevant here is the analysis that they did with the people who had actually been looting and rioting, and they were asked why they'd done it. And they said, well, the reason that they did it really was because they didn't feel any respect for authority or for private property. And the reason for that is that they felt disenfranchised. They felt though they didn't belong. They felt that society had abandoned them. They felt as though they weren't really included. Okay? And I think that's a really interesting analogy to draw with business. I really do. I think that within business, if somebody feels left out, if they feel as though they're sidelined, if they feel as though they're not part of it, if they're not on a career path, then they can act in ways that will become difficult and eventually could be destructive to the company. And if you leave them long enough, they'll run into your room when you're not looking and nick your trainers. So, what I learned very, very quickly was the right way to manage. Okay, a modern way of managing, which to me needs to be much more participatory, much more democratic, much more about communication. Now, this is the key message from this speech. Communication is the key facet to me of leadership. The more you communicate, the better you will be as a leader. And I'm talking about communicating with people as individuals and communicating with the group as a whole. So, in terms of communicating in terms of individuals, you need to, if possible, you need to get to know your team individually. You need to get to know what motivates them. You need to get to know their character. You need to get to know the way they think. And crucially, as a whole, you need to be able to articulate the vision of the company. You need to be able to tell them which way you're moving as a company. You need to explain to them why they're doing things, not just what they're doing, why they're doing it. You need to be able to get everybody on a shared sense of mission. I've got a quote, and I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to get it wrong, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's what I think, when you're trying to get everybody involved in the big picture of your company. It's by a Frenchman called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. If you build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. It's the big picture. People have to know the big picture, otherwise it's not really going to work. And similarly, just as communication is a key facet of modern leadership, so is empathy. Empathy is all important. You know what I mean by empathy? You need to be able to think at any point, how is my behaviour making that person feel? How is it making him or her feel? Is it making him or her feel trusted, valued, secure, insecure, happy, unhappy? If you can empathise in that way, if you can empathise with each member of your staff, then you'll go a long way. Communication and empathy, two incredibly important points, and I think if you can do them both, then you can preempt any disillusionment or negativity that begins to creep in. And negativity, I don't know whether you've all heard of Chris Morris. He's a kind of satirist in this country. He does spoof interviews, and he was interviewing a band called Two Unlimited, who were a Dutch band who did a song about 20 years ago called There's No Limit. I don't really remember it. No, I don't really remember it. And anyway, this Dutch band came in and they didn't know who he was, and they were really bemused by him. And he sat there and he said, first question, he said, so, Two Unlimited. No, 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 no. A little bit negative, isn't it? They didn't have a clue what was going on. The point is that negativity is a cancer at the heart of companies. It can rip companies apart. Negativity is an awful thing. It's like dry rot. Once it sets in, you can't stop it. And I think you've actually got to try, if you've got to actually move to stop it, then it's too late invariably. You've got to preempt it. Really, really important. So, what I'm talking about, I think, is a modern way of leadership, something that I came to realise with my company, that you needed to behave in a certain way. Some people view leadership as authority. Other people view it as a service. And I think it's the people that view it as a service that do a lot better. It's the people that show real humility. It's the people that show a real lack of ego. The more ego I think you have as a leader, the worse you'll be. If you're more bothered about personal aggrandizement or career advancement for yourself, then you're stuffed. I really believe that as an effective leader. If you're not the type of leader who'll take the flak for your team if they do wrong thing, then you're going in the wrong direction. If you're unprepared to, if you point the finger and accuse your team of doing things when they do things wrong, again, if you're accusatory, you'll struggle. I had real problems with this, I remember at times, because I was a real stickler for grammatical accuracy and literacy. And I remember one time we moved into new offices, and there was a junior member of staff had put a note on the toilets, and it said, please leave these loos in a respective manor, M-A-N-O-R, which, what, Basildon or something. I remember thinking, you've got to bite your tongue if people do things that you don't like, and you've got to understand why they're doing it as opposed to quickly pointing the finger, I think. And it's all about not creating a them and us feel. If you can make people feel that they're part of a big team, I think that's all important. And really, really crucial with that is getting your hands dirty. Really being, you know, prepared to know the technical side of your work. Really, really important. With me, we had something within our company that the kind of scourge of lots of media companies, they're called content management systems. I don't know whether you've ever come across them in your work. It's basically the system by which you input content into whatever media you're delivering to, email or, websites or mobile or whatever it might be. And some of these are more, you know, more complicated than Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You know, they're just absolutely horrific. And this one came in, it was an important client, I should have learnt it, and I didn't. I just kind of felt, I don't know what I felt I didn't have time. You know, kind of the tyranny of time. I just didn't have the time to do it. So I didn't do it. And of course, this caused huge resentment with my staff because they were, you know, slaving away day and night. I couldn't answer the questions when they didn't know how to do something. And it was all the time they were asking, and I couldn't answer the questions. And they'd be there late at night, and I couldn't help them. It was a real problem. So you must learn the technical side of your business. Know what all your members of staff are doing and how they're doing it. Know their jobs. You know, work harder than them. It's obvious. Work harder. Don't be seen taking boozy lunches. Don't go onto Facebook and Twitter if that's, you know, what you don't want them doing. Sounds pretty obvious, I think. But, you know, but some people do. And these are the kind of keynote themes of my talk so far. Communication, empathy, also empowerment. Really, really important. Empowerment. How do you empower your staff? Give them permission to fail and to experiment. It's really, really important. I think Ricky touched on Richard Branson. He had a great quote which said, you don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn to walk by falling over. You know, you need to empower people within your team to do things that might seem beyond them. Give them the tools to do these things. It's really important. You know, if you're the type of leader who keeps information back because you're concerned or threatened by its release, and let's face it, you're really going to go nowhere. It's really important to do that. And also, we've talked, I think everyone touches on this. Whenever anyone talks about leadership, passion invariably is going to be the word. I think passion or the evangelizing about your brand or your product. If you don't evangelize about something, your staff sure as hell aren't going to. And what's the reason? You know, when you think about it, why Google and everyone who works at Google is so incredibly happy with their work. Okay, so they've got a 24-hour canteen, yeah? Everyone eats there 3 meals a day. No one ever leaves. They'll get fat, they sit at the desk, no one can move. It's brilliant. But no, the real reason is that the two founders spend a hell of a lot of time concentrating on their passion for the brand, and they make sure that it permeates down through the company. Passion is absolutely crucial. Steve Jobs, in the keynote speech he gave at Stanford, I'm sure you've all seen it, all talks about how it's incumbent on us all to do things that we're really, really passionate about. Why? Because true creativity stems from passion. You can't really do something creative, properly creative, unless you're passionate about it. I strongly believe that. To conclude, I think that leadership, or modern leadership, actually Mandela has a really interesting approach to, or way of putting modern leadership and distilling it. He calls it the goat herders theory. Have you heard of this? It's a kind of more inclusive way of management, of modern management. What you basically do as a goat herder is you stand within and you kind of cajole and coerce and encourage your herd along. It's a more modern type of leadership as opposed to the old autocratic, you know, you do what I say type of leadership. And I think actually what's happened is that whereas in the 80s and the 90s, lots of leadership diktats were kind of based on sporting analogies, you know, like win, compete. I think what we've got now is a more kind of feminine or familial type of leadership, whereby we're encouraged to use more feminine traits to succeed in management. Empathy, nurturing, you know, support, comfort, you know, inspiration. All these things, I think, we're coming at this from a more feminine perspective. I think that's a fantastic thing. You know, I mean, Steve Jobs and Picasso again, or Mark Zuckerberg, they can lead through the sheer force of their nature, their stature, their absolute stature. But for most of us, it's about hard work and it's about getting to know your team. You not only have to have the ability to influence, you have to have the desire to influence. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Just going to leave you with one quote, which I absolutely love, but again, I don't want to get it wrong. I mean, some leaders create followers, yeah, some leaders create followers, but other leaders create leaders. And I think it's incumbent on us all, again, I think Ricky touched on this, I really did, but to make sure that you're bringing up the next generation of leaders, whether that's bringing them up through the company or hiring them. And there's a fantastic quote from David Ogilvy. You must know this, and to me, it's the best way of distilling everything that a company needs into one sentence. If each of us hires people who are bigger than us, we shall become a company of giants. And I think that's a really, really interesting way of looking at it. Nice to talk to you. I can be found on Twitter on Nick Garkon, which is Garkon, if you're interested. And you can get my email from Lisa. Okay.